Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the second Project Baseline UK live stream. If you're in Wales, I hope you're enjoying being out of lockdown. If you're in England, I hope you're enjoying week one of lockdown. And if you're in Scotland, I hope you're looking forward to lockdown. Hopefully these talks will provide a little bit of entertainment and a bit of a distraction from what's going on in the real world. And the aim of them really is just to introduce Project Baseline UK to you guys a little bit more. And excitingly, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, to hear a little bit about some of the actual projects that are going on. So this week, really pleased to be joined by Rob and Martin, who are going to talk to us about Project Baseline Midland Pools. So I'm going to pause there and welcome them both to the live stream and hand over to them to hear some exciting news about the progress of their projects. Over to you guys, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Marcus. Well, I'm Martin, and that's Rob. I'm Rob. How you doing? We're going to tell you a little bit about Project Baseline Midland Pools. I'll start off quickly, though, by telling you about Project Baseline, in case you missed Marcus's talk from last week. Then we'll tell you a bit about what we've been getting up to this year and the sites that we're looking to study. A bit of the background research that we've been doing while COVID has been preventing us diving, but we have got out, so there's been a little bit of site work this year, which I'll finish off with. So first off, Project Baseline is a now global non-profit organisation, but it came originally from the Florida cave diving scene. Divers in the springs there noticed that there was change happening over time, but it was really only in their memories, and the springs still looked pretty good to new people who were diving them for the first time. And so they made this observation that unless you recorded what was going on, it was easy to miss changes that you'd actually rather be able to see. So the photo here kind of illustrates that principle. On the left, you've got a picture from 1995, and then on the right, the same view in 2012, when you can see the water's got a lot more green and there's less plant material on the bottom of the pool. So Project Baseline provides a framework for divers to set up teams to monitor sites they visit regularly, with core data being photographs of the same position and temperature and visibility measurements. But you can basically expand it to do whatever you want to do after that. Okay, so Rob and I are co-project managers for the Project Baseline Midland Pools team. So we registered this in March this year, so we're not been going very long, with the aim of studying 6 sites in Leicestershire and Warwickshire, and basically looking to answer 2 questions at the moment. Simply, what's in the quarry pools under the water is kind of first objective, and then secondly, is this environment favourable or unfavourable to whatever might be in there. Longer term, you could think of a third question, say, well, is it changing? But we're starting simple, so those are the first 2 questions. The other thing we wanted to do, though, the second aim really, is to have a project that allows the development of project divers, giving people an opportunity to dive locally on a project, test out different methods and techniques and their skills and working in teams and so on, that could be usefully applied to different projects in the future. So I'll go through the 6 sites that we've chosen and just give you an overview of them and the different characteristics, because they represent slightly different habitats, which perhaps makes them interesting to compare and contrast. So the first one is Swindon Wood. This is an ancient woodland. It's a site of special scientific interest, which is the highest level of designation you can get in the UK, really, for environmental sites. But it's the woodland that's the feature that's designated rather than the pools. there's 24 quarries in this woodland area, but only 2 were of a size that was sort of commercially viable. And so we're looking at one Great Pit, which is a slate quarry, 55 meters maximum depth, although half of it is about 18. Hill Hole Quarry is the second one. This is the opposite end of the depth spectrum, only 6 meters. That's largely because it's rain fed, so it just fills up to that level. It's a granite quarry, so different material. And there's a population of crayfish that are known to be in here, so that's maybe a feature we'll come back to in a second. Third one is Stony Cove. This will be familiar, I'm sure, with many divers in the UK as a commercial dive centre. We wanted to have one site where you didn't need special permission to turn up and dive, and this sort of helps to get more people involved. Stony Cove's an old granite quarry, platforms or shelves at about 7, 22 and 35, 36 meters depth. Fourth one is Enzer's Pool in Nuneaton. Now, this is the second of the 2 SSSI sites, and this one actually is designated for a large population of crayfish, although there's a bit of doubt as to whether they're still there. So this makes it a little bit interesting to go and have a look. It's a clay pit, was used to, or the extracted material was used to make bricks, and it's about 10 meters deep as well. Move the slides on. There we go. And then the last 2, we've got Newbold Quarry and Bishop's Hill Nature Reserve, and the pool there is called Blue Pool. These are both limestone quarries. Blue lies material was extracted for cement and lime production. They're sort of similar depths, 15 meters and 10 meters, but Newbold was an established nature reserve and has been for many years, whereas Bishop's Hill has only been managed for the last couple of years actively. So there's maybe some contrast there to be seen between the two sites. Newbold was again supposed to have some native crayfish in, but who knows about Blue Pool. Okay, for the rest of this talk, I'll just talk about Newbold and Blue Pool just as examples. We're effectively doing the same thing at each site, but you'll kind of get the idea. We started off with some background research. So just tell you a little bit about this. So we want to answer this question about what's in the water. And okay, thanks, John. Yep, sorry about that. We've had some slight technical issues. I'll just start again from this slide here. I was just saying that we'll talk about Newbold Quarry and Blue Pool as kind of examples for the rest of the talk, because we've been doing kind of similar stuff on each of them, and it does get a bit repetitious. Okay, so we did a bit of background research to start off with. Now, remember, our first question was what's in the pools. So from a plants and animals perspective, you can you can consult the data from your local biological record centre. So we asked the one in Warwickshire, which is run by the council, what records they had. These are generally used for a land use planning perspective, but they'll share them if you ask. So at Newbold, that's the centre of this picture, and then there's a 1 kilometre diameter circle around it. And we asked, well, what records have you got within that? And they had quite a few, 115, including 16 non-native species. In terms of the pool, though, there was 4 records of white-clawed crayfish, which are native to the UK. 2 without dates, one from 1993 and the other from 2004. So they've not been spotted recently. But the only other thing in the water was toads and frogs, although there were some great crested newts nearby, which is another kind of protected species. And then comparing to Blue Pool, the much smaller pool right in the very centre of this picture, there's 101 records, including 31 non-native species. And again, within the pool, only toads and frogs. And now, more worryingly, there was 1 report of a signal crayfish, which is a non-native species, in the pond just to the east or to the right of the picture, so quite close to Blue Pool, and also some zebra mussels, which kind of get everywhere. And again, there was some great crested newts in some of the waterways nearby. So this was quite interesting. White-clawed crayfish are probably familiar to most divers of quarries in the UK, because they're in Stony Cove and Bobster and various other places. These little lobster-looking creatures, they're the UK's only native freshwater crayfish, so the largest kind of native inland crustacean, and they're in severe decline. The IUCN Red List of Threatened Species rates them as endangered, which is kind of more threatened than the panda is these days. But they're heavily protected by quite a few different laws, so you can't take them or sell them, you can't trap them and so on without licenses from various people, which we want to avoid needing. Thinking about the parameters that Project Baseline is looking at, and temperature being one, they are sort of temperature dependent creatures. So breeding is initiated by water temperature changes, and there's some thoughts that they don't last long above 18 degrees, although that's maybe not a huge problem. But of course, there aren't many sites which have had continuous kind of monitoring. So who knows in reality what happens. I mentioned non-native species, so these are introduced into this country. They're not kind of originally resident. So the one that you might be more concerned about is the North American signal crayfish, the guy on the photograph in the top right there. These were introduced in the 70s and 80s, and they basically decimated the native white-clawed population. For 2 reasons. One is they're kind of bigger and they outcompete them a bit. So it's a kind of red squirrel, grey squirrel situation. But they also carry a fungal disease, crayfish plague, which they've evolved with, so they're kind of immune to. But it will kill every single white claw within the river or the pool once it gets in there. And there's a few other non-natives that you might have seen before. Zebra mussels are everywhere in the quarries and so on. But there's quite a few different sorts of pondweed and things as well. So these might be around. In terms of background research, we had a look at old maps. These are available on the internet from the National Library of Scotland. So here, we'll show you a couple of maps. The blue arrow is just to help you orientate yourself. So it's on the junction between the sort of main road going north-south roughly and a farm track going east-west. And the blue circle is where Blue Pool is, as an example. So you can see on the Ordnance Survey map from the 1888 to 1913 that it's still a field basically in that area. You can see the cement works is there in the bottom right hand corner, and there's quite extensive quarrying to the south. but they're not yet expanded into the Blue Pool area. Whereas you move over to the next set, and by 1937, Blue Pool's been dug, as has Mitre Pool over the road, and a whole lot of other stuff. And those two pools have flooded already and are being marked as reservoirs now. And there's some infrastructure about. There's a railway line just below the pool there that's taking extracted material away, presumably for processing. So you kind of wonder what's there now. Yeah, give me a next slide. So we found some other stuff, aerial photographs. This actually is an aerial photograph from 1927. So between the dates of the two maps that I showed, and you can see up in the top left-hand corner there is Blue Pool and the cement works at the other side. But the roads, the infrastructure there is there. There's actually a train going along the railway line in that photograph as well. And more recent satellite images, if you go onto Google Earth, you can track through their archive of images. So, and they have some dates on them. So, same blue circle, blue arrow to orientate yourself. You can see in 2010, you can see the pool, and then next door the green arrow shows Mitre Pool, and then there's a bit of grassland and some fields to the north marked by that grey arrow. Whereas you flick forward to 2017 and somebody's dumped a load of earth in the Mitre Pool, but everything else is looking pretty similar. And then you go along to this year, and the pool looks like it's been dug out again. That's a angling lake, so they're obviously doing some work. But they started building houses on the field right next to the pool, and now there's a lot more houses there. You can do the same thing at Newbold Quarry and have a look at the maps there, but I won't go through these as they're quite similar. But these two photographs that we unearthed from 1976 were quite interesting because the quarry is basically nearly drained. For those that know the history or were around at the time, 1976 was a very hot year. And at this time, the quarry was being used as a reservoir for keeping the canal, which was quite close, topped up. So it obviously needed a lot more water than it had normally, and it drained the quarry pretty much. And the little grey arrow in the left-hand picture is what we think is a barge with a pump house on it. You get a better view of that in the right-hand picture. So I wonder if that's still there. And there's some pipe work going up as well. So we've done our background research. We now want to get on site, remembering the two questions that we had about what's in the pool and is the environment favourable or not. We had to think about what we should be measuring when we're establishing the baseline. So first thing is to do some surveys. We can do transect surveys for the wildlife, or and have a bit, well, basically swim around, see what's down there, and take some photographs. We also wanted to measure temperature. As I said, that may be important for crayfish, and it's one of the core parameters anyway for Project Baseline. So we've got some temperature loggers like the one shown here that will monitor take the temperature readings every hour or so till you turn them off, basically. For visibility, we are using the standard Project Baseline method of a 20 centimetre Secchi disc, like the one shown here. You can basically measure the distance between your eye and the disc at the point when it kind of just disappears from view, and you get a relatively repeatable measurement of horizontal visibility. And then we also wanted to take some water samples and get them analysed. And there's a whole number of parameters that have been come up with, people have come up with that we can look at. So the list there shows the ones that are getting tested, and the range shows these are all related to the crayfish. So crayfish are found within these parameters, or with these parameters, and within these ranges. But their preferred range is the narrower black one. So we'd quite like to see where the pools come on this list, and it's various things like calcium and sodium levels, conductivity that sort of shows the saltiness, phosphate and nitrate and so on, which can be increased with agricultural runoff and so on. So various parameters that we can sort of baseline. And then we started planning for the project day. So as I said, all but one of the sites we've got to get permission to dive. So we've got quite a chunky method statement and risk assessment, which kind of helps the landowners have confidence that we're going to be responsible. But it also gives us a bit of standardization amongst the project team for the way we're going to try and do things. Because as we said, we opened up the project team to basically any diver. So with different agency backgrounds, then people have got slightly different ways of doing things. And we did want to adopt a team diving approach and get standardization within the team at least. So the plan for the day, at least the first ones, was to have an orientation dive straight off, and then set up the visibility station and the temperature station and take some photos and sample the water. And then we'll have a go at mapping the pools. 3 ways of doing that. We'd go with a drone, which on clear water days you could kind of see a little bit of what's in the shallows. We've got a small sonar that we could hang off the back of a kayak. And then lastly, just diver observation. So these kind of form part of the surveying that we're doing, but we'll also note any animals and plants that we see as well. And lastly, we wanted to remove any litter that was around. Certainly some of the pools there's quite a lot, and that's really because it's hard for the landowners to maintain the water. A lot of these are nature reserves and they get lots of volunteers to do stuff on land, but access the water is a bit harder. But obviously as divers, we're kind of used to that. But we don't want to go in just removing stuff left, right and centre. So this is a little extract from the method statement that sort of says, well, how are we going to assess whether we should leave stuff under the water or remove it? Clearly cars are pretty difficult to remove, but smaller things might have pollution potential or be an entanglement hazard. They might be quite complex to lift, or it could just be wind blown or human thrown litter, which would be kind of easier just to collect up in net bags. But it might become a habitat, and so you might not want to remove some stuff. So the plan really is to assess this before you go in and take it out. And we want to avoid kicking up too much silt because the crayfish with their delicate gills don't like that. And also we want to check whether things are being used as refuges by the crayfish as well. As I said, they're kind of protected species. So a quick photo here, what the temperature and visibility station looks like at these 2 sites at least. So we've got a cement base and a pole which we've affixed the Secchi disc to, and then we've put the temperature probe in the bottom of that as well, and basically just floated them out on lift bags and dropped them down into a relatively shallow location, about 7 meters typically, and somewhere where we hope to be able to find them again relatively easily. So you can see the photo on the right there is from Newbold Quarry. It's about 6.5 meters visibility there, but pretty green looking water. We sampled the water as well. You can see the water actually in Rob's hand in the photo on the right there is quite clear, even though it's quite green by appearance. And then the other sample there is for dissolved oxygen analysis, and it needs a few chemicals adding on site to stabilise the oxygen, and that turns it this slightly unpleasant, unnerving browny orange colour. They've been sent off to the lab. In terms of the mapping, here's an example with the drone at Newbold. So you can sort of see, hopefully, there's a shelf with some quite sort of severe right angles on it at the north side, which is the sort of right hand side of this picture, if you've got a decent screen. So there's a couple of shelves there you can actually see from the surface. Diver observation was pretty effective. Just swimming around a few teams during the day, we could pull together this kind of depth map and kind of sketch the shelves, at least at the first approximation. So you can see there that there's a shallow bit to the left-hand side and it gets deeper in the middle. There's actually an old road to the right-hand side, and I think that's how we've ended up with so many cars in at that side of the pool. But we did also find something that looked like that barge that we'd seen in the photo from 1976, which is the little house sign. I think actually, having dived it again, it's probably a little bit further to the north than that, but you can see how we can refine these maps as we go along. There's plenty of trees and cars and so on in there as well. You can see from the photos on the right. This was the sonar mapping. So we bought this little fish finder sonar and attached it to the kayak, and then we sent Steve off to paddle for an hour and a half, and he covered nearly over a mile, which is if you can just make out a blue trace, he's gone up and down in a sort of mowing the grass sort of format. And you see the pattern at the trace at the bottom is the sort of sonar that you typically see on a boat, and it's picked up a few fish as well in there. So processing that at the sort of high resolution, you can see it didn't get close enough together, so there's some gaps in the left-hand high resolution image. But if you just knock the resolution down a little bit, it fills them in quite nicely. And you can sort of see there the shapes of the shelves, where darker orange colours are shallower. And this correlated quite well to what we could actually see as you sort of swim round. And it showed there across the whole pool, the depth, the maximum depth was 10.4 meters, which is what we measured with a dive computer. But of course, the benefit of this is you kind of cover the whole pool. So we kind of look to go back and give that another go later on. In terms of surveying, there's a benefit to having a standardized survey. And so we've adopted this one from the Freshwater Habitats Trust, which is the form on the left-hand side, which you can fill in various parameters on. The photo in the centre is a white-clawed crayfish from Newbold Quarry. So it's hiding in a little refuge there in the geological formation. So you can see the limestone layers that have been built up, and it's built up with sort of mudstone and so on in between, and things can get washed out. So we've managed to confirm there that there's at least 2 white-clawed crayfish, as we saw 2, sheltering. So that's the first record since 2004. More worryingly, at Blue Pool, we've spotted this signal crayfish. Now it's clearly dead and not in the pool, but it was on the bank. So this doesn't confirm that you've got signal crayfish in the pool, but it's a sort of a strong indication, and worth going back and having a good look. The visibility on the day we were there last was only 1.4 meters, so it's kind of hard to see anything much at all. But that would be an unfortunate record if there are some crayfish there, but there were some, or at least one record from close by, so perhaps not too surprising. And then we've managed to recover a whole lot of litter. This is the stuff from Blue Pool, about half of the pile that we pulled up, mainly bottles and so on. These sites are not fenced, so they're used by kids for swimming and people having barbecues, and although it's not sort of authorised, it's difficult to kind of prevent. We've done a bit of survey, a bit of removal. So there, in summary, we've obviously only started in March and been affected by COVID, so results are pending. But we managed to kick off, and we've done a lot of admin, basically, and a lot of background research. But we've had a few days diving, despite COVID. This is the quick pitch for anybody that wants to get involved. Now, you're very welcome to join our Facebook group and go diving if you're local in particular. But if you're at Stony Cove, we've got 2 stations there, one at 4 metres on the 6 metre shelf, and then another one at 18 metres on the Wessex. The first one's on the winch, which is kind of past the Gresham. It's quite a long swim, so it's sort of out of the way. But there's a knotted rope on each of those stations, and you're encouraged to give us a visibility and temperature reading when you're next there. So last slide only remains for us to thank the British Sub-Aqua Jubilee Trust, who gave us some money. That's allowed us to do some of the bits of work I've described, and that project will carry on for the rest of next year. And then we're very grateful for the 6 partners whose logos are there below: the Wildlife Trust in Warwickshire, and Bradgate Park Trust, Natural England, and the local councils for giving us permission to dive these sites. And then lastly, the 20 volunteers that have turned up for the diving this year, which is pretty good. That's it. I think we'll hand over for questions if anyone has any.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Martin. That's a really interesting run through of your progress in the short time that you've been running. I think the thing I love about this project is how you've kind of found something that's right on your doorstep, and not only gone out and just sort of done the visibility and temperature reading type stuff, but you've actually found an interesting little project with the crayfish side of things, and also adding the value through the litter clearing and that sort of thing, which is really great. And one of the things I've certainly found with a lot of the projects we do in the UK is finding those questions to answer. And I think there was a question last week about the need for that. How did you go about finding out about the crayfish piece and getting advice and guidance on what sort of things might be interesting to look at?
I guess.
Well, I think the crayfish thing initially came from the local portals, ENSA's, the Triple SI. It was a Triple SI because of the crayfish originally, but they'd all thought to have been wiped out from that site. And then they're at Stony Cove. I think that spurred us on originally to look at some of these other sites with these unofficial reports. So that's where the crayfish thing just first came from.
Yeah, I mean, we got some good advice because of the licensing requirements, and we wanted to avoid that. You can approach Natural England and the Environment Agency and ask them questions. So we did get advice from both of them as well on what you can and can't do. Certainly the Triple SI sites, you need consent from Natural England to dive them as well, which we've obtained. But yeah, they're pretty helpful, really.
Yeah, good. We found up in Scotland that actually there's quite a lot of information on the government websites that give you sort of readout of things that government and local organisations are interested in researching in the local area. So whilst it might not seem all that accessible, actually there's quite a lot of information freely available on the internet for people that are looking for things to introduce to these sorts of projects. Great, no,
Yeah,
thanks so
that's
much, guys. That's really great. Let's bring John in and see if there's any questions at all come up on the chat.
To add to it, well, there's a few more looking at the moment, aren't we? But it's what you do with all your time, isn't it? I think it's quite difficult at the moment, as we've said, with COVID, getting the thing off the ground and then getting permission to these sites all the time and correlating the data. I think once we find ourselves in a position maximising the sites we've already got, there's a couple of backups that might be interesting to go to, or potentially if we get the divers involved, we could sort of let that out to other folk. It's yeah, so there could be other teams running, helping out with the burden as it was a little bit as well. But so still
yeah.
early days, isn't it? Yeah, 6 a lot to manage.
Yeah, I don't know whether he means additional to the two that we talked about, or additional to the 5 or 6 that we've kind of got. But I think you pretty much answered it. We certainly tried to carry on diving through the winter. I think if we get unlocked down and install these temperature and visibility stations. Yeah, we've the local records centres collect observations from here, there, and everywhere, and they're used for land use planning. So if you've got a development, it's a requirement that you search their database. So things that observations and records of things, particularly that are protected, like the white-clawed crayfish, would be extremely useful. If you know that they're there, then they're kind of able to be protected. I guess in terms of other things, we didn't really mention it in the talk, but there is quite a lot of unauthorized swimming in the more accessible pools, and the local communities are really interested to know what's under the water from a hazards perspective, because people are jumping in off the sides, and there's obviously a risk there. So we've been sort of sharing the information with the local communities largely through Facebook, and that's been sort of fairly well received. In terms of other data sources, though, I think we've been exploring who might be interested in the stuff that we're collecting, and I guess that's as far as we've got at the time. This time, but we are talking to other people, I suppose, but maybe not.
It's quite a pertinent question, Martin, actually, isn't it? Because it's. So I was going to say it's quite a pertinent question, really, because it's the one thing I think in the UK with all of the projects that we really try and find a proper outlet for the information. So hopefully some of the stuff we're going to do next year up off Eyemouth is actually in support of an organisation that's looking for specific data for us to go off and find. I think it does add that extra bit of motivation for the divers and a little bit of reward as well when you actually know that the information that you're presenting or collecting and putting together is being gainfully used. So yeah, I mean, I think it really gets to the nub of what we're trying to achieve with a bit more coordination through Project Based on UK and increased collaborations for all of the project, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Are there any more, John, that are coming up?
Yeah, we've got one here from Kathy. Is it desirable or permissible to remove the red claw crayfish?
Well, I think we're discussing this not long ago, weren't we? When saying about some of the waters that cool pike. I think we'll start removing crayfish. They tend to have a bit of elevation explosion to replace the cells. I think with the invasive species, they get to a certain limit and then plateau. Once you start taking them out, they're just replaced by more that need to feed a lot more to get a certain size. But yeah, unless you could find a way of wiping them out 100%, then it's not really productive, is it?
Yeah, I think you're right. Once the signal crayfish are in, you're pretty stuffed. You need a license from the Environment Agency to trap them. But yeah, you just trap. The problem with traps is that they're size selective, and so you take the big ones out, and the buried females apparently avoid them, and so you just end up with, as Rob says, a more smaller ones.
So is the only answer there, Martin, to prevent the red ones from spreading to the other quarries? Is that the only way really preventing them from forcing out the other species?
Yeah, so I mean, the signal crayfish were basically escaped. They were brought over, introduced into this country in the 70s and 80s for food, but human consumption. But I think that didn't really work, and it hasn't taken off. I think it is actually, as Kathy says, red claw ones that you see in the supermarkets. But yeah, with the signal ones, they're everywhere. Really, and once they're in a river system, they'll obviously spread, and because they carry this fungal disease that they're immune for, and they're bigger as well. They'll outcompete other sorts, but they'll also kill them. So the important part about the quarries is that they're isolated from river systems, and so it's a conservation method to develop these as sort of arc sites in effect. So at least you know that they should be kind of safe. The white clawed one should be safe. I mean, there's 6 different non-native crayfish species, and other ones are much more localized. And so some of them are, or the European ones are also susceptible to crayfish plague, so it's unlikely that they would kind of, they'll be wiped out, these smaller populations. It is pretty much just the signal ones that are the problem.
Cool.
Thanks, Martin.
Following on from that, we've got a question from Owen, who's basically saying, have you guys put any protocols in place to mitigate the spread of crayfish during during your travels and your diving?
Yeah, definitely. I'll let.
Got our
So
we keep in place.
I was waiting for you to jump in. There's a standard clean, check, dry procedure, or it might be check, clean, dry. I can never remember the order. But basically, it's essentially what divers would do anyway. Is that you wash your kit in fresh water and dry it out for a couple of days. Certainly from a crayfish plague perspective, the fungus spores don't really last more than a couple of days if they're dried out. And then, but you've got to be careful with mud and with other stuff on your boots and so on. So it is really important that you don't go from one site to another without doing that. So we have been careful about that, and it is one thing that Natural England was really hot on, but it was good that we discovered this protocol beforehand, so it was in our method statement when we gave it to them.
Any more, John?
One more that I've got at the moment from Mike, basically asking, how do the crayfish get from one water site to another?
Well, the idea with the quarry pools is that they can't. So presumably, the native ones were introduced by humans at some point. It's not that clear. If it's in a river system, of course, they can sort of travel through the water. The pesky signal crayfish, though, they can kind of survive a bit longer out of the water, so they can walk. So you can get movements from one site to another.
Cool. That's it that we've got so far.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. Great. Thanks so much, guys. I think what we'll probably do is wrap it up there, and then if people have got any questions afterwards, they can put them into either the comments for this live stream or just into the Project Baseline UK group, or even go over to the Midland Pools Facebook group and have a look there. So thanks so much to Martin and Rob for giving up their Friday evening to talk to us. This is one of our really active projects, and I really admire how much effort you guys have put into employing some great scientific techniques, really, with the amount of data that you're collecting through your temperature data loggers, that work you've done with the fish finder sonar. Just goes to reiterate what we said last week, really, to show how much you can achieve when you've got enthusiastic volunteers and citizen scientists that have got a question to answer and are enthusiastic enough to go out and pursue those questions. It's great. So thanks very much for your time. Thanks also to John for a second week in a row setting us up with the live stream. We might have some questions for him next week, given all his project background. Maybe not let him get away with just sitting in the background and running the live stream. But thanks again, John. And thanks for everyone to tuning in. We've got 2 more left in the lockdown series. So next week, another really exciting project. So a really enthusiastic couple up in the relatively remote Isle of Skye doing some great work with firework anemones. Just the 2 of them running a project up there. So that'll be really interesting to hear the progress that they've made. And then the final one will be in just over 2 weeks' time, actually on the Monday rather than the Friday. We're looking forward to hosting Dr. Todd Kincaid, who's going to talk to us about slightly more glamorous, warm, clear water submarines, technical divers, but again, science project under the banner of Project Baseline. So that'll be a really nice way to finish off the series. So great, thanks very much. We'll sign off.
Thank you.
Cheers.